I want to start this video off with a story. When I was 8 years old, we used to stay at a family's friend's house a lot. And on one particular day, my brother and I decided to take turns jumping over a tiny man-made pond they had in the front yard. We kept going and going, progressing further towards the middle, where it would be the longest jump. And when it was my turn next, well, I knew what was coming. Jump across the center. I was scared, panicked even. I was like 3 feet at the time, my leaping ability was subpar at best. But I would never back down from a dare. So I gathered up all of my courage and took the leap of faith, and immediately proceeded to start drowning. I say this even knowing to this day that the pond's depth was probably only like half my height. I wasn't actually in any real danger, but there was a menacing force residing just below the surface, waiting and hiding until it found a chance to strike from below. A horrific, almost Lovecraftian horror snatched me up, almost dragging me down to the murky depth below. In reality, what happened was a lily-pad stem wrapped around my leg and kept me slightly submerged underwater for a few seconds longer than I would have liked, which was especially scary since I couldn't swim and had actually almost died via drowning years prior. My life was not in danger here, but perhaps my sanity was and still is. And no, this video is not a joke. I have an almost primal phobia of lily pads. And while this experience is certainly the core root of it, I don't think it's necessarily the actual reason. That fear is something that has been more or less unknown to me over the years, and is only something that I think I've fully contextualized recently. And yes, this horror is of the existential and cosmic variety. And yes, we are still talking about lily pads. So if you want to find out why, well, let's go on this wild journey together. What scared me the most after this harrowing experience was not really the fact that I thought I was drowning, but it was that lily pads had stems. I was unaware of this beforehand, and while that same stem is what wrapped around my leg and almost sent me to an early death, I don't really think that's what frightened me about it. Rather, it feels tied to an abstract, almost aesthetic sense. I want you to imagine that you're underwater, eyes wide open, and you look above. All you see is flat, circular abominations. But when you look below them, that's when you see their true horror. Their long stems that seemingly reach down into hell itself. Their length knows no bounds. If you're a sane person, this should frighten you. And when I posed this question to my subscribers a few weeks ago, it got me thinking, why exactly is this so scary? And it did not take me long before I arrived at my answer, one that is derived from this very same horrors that kept Lovecraft up at night. When you see a lily pad, you imagine it's just that, a pad. A little green plant that just sits on top of the water minding its own business. You can understand that trees have roots, grass has roots, and all other plants have roots, but a lily pad, it just seems different. It's hard to fathom that there's anything else down there. We can dig up a clump of grass and see those roots, but the sea, or any body of water for that matter, has always been different from land. It's mysterious, frightening, awe-inspiring, so much so that people have often compared it to the dark abyss above. The cosmic portion of cosmic horror is of course derived from that endless expanse of space, as it largely remains something that we just can't quantify, which on an evolutionary scale is always terrifying to us little humans down here. Technically speaking, you can dig up a lily pad, but in your abstract understanding of them, those stems seem infinite. They can go anywhere, especially since they're usually disturbingly long in length. And I believe it is this very fact that makes me so scared of them, even if I didn't quite understand that as a child. Reality is a fickle thing. Our own perception of it, our own reality, you could put it, is entirely different from any real physical world. While the color red does scientifically exist as a number, those numbers are simply a perception of the natural world, our attempt to quantify it. And even our eyes' interpretation of the color red cannot be said to be the same across different people. It's been proven time and time again that our brains do not perceive the world on a one-to-one basis, and often take shortcuts to make living in it much easier. Imagine driving to work. You're 43 years old, and at this point, you've been making this commute for 20 years now. It's habitual. So I guarantee you that you did not remember this individual drive. When you're in that car now for years even, your mind has been elsewhere. In your own reality, you weren't really driving that car, as our perception is almost entirely derived from our memory. If you don't remember the drive, it, from your point of view, didn't really happen. But of course it did, that's undeniable. But within your mind's eye, which is the only thing that can really form your own reality, it didn't. And you can argue that consciousness is not entirely tied to memory. Thus, even if you don't remember something, your mind, not just your brain, did process it. You were alive in that car. And I see your point here, but I disagree. We live entirely within memories. We exist as a concept in the memories of others, but even more than that, our entire reality that we, our minds experience, is remembered, not lived. If a ball is thrown at you, you'll probably catch it. But there is a specific point in time when the ball is thrown, a nanosecond in the natural world. That is undeniable. However, your brain's computing power is not instantaneous. It will take at least a few milliseconds before your brain can process the information hurling at you. So the time that the ball is thrown at you, and the time that you perceive the ball to be thrown, is entirely not the same. Thus, your brain's awareness is fundamentally not in line with the flow of actual reality, instead having to create a plane of perceived reality. But the only way we can form that plane is with not just the power of the brain, but of the mind, which I believe to be inherently different, but fully explaining that would be a whole book in and of itself. Don't worry, I'm working on it. This is where the situation becomes even more dire. Because while the brain can process and make the body react within a few milliseconds at the minimum by catching the ball, the mind is twice as slow, if not longer. Just because your body reacts doesn't mean your mind is aware of it yet. This is what we call muscle memory, or in first-time cases, a fight-or-flight reaction. Let's go back to our example. The ball is thrown, your brain computes that. It's purely mechanical. The brain will send signals to your muscles to do the task of catching the ball. But the mind is a bit more abstract than that. Once past the emergency response, it becomes unclear what it means for something to actually be thrown. It's technically an abstract concept. This kind of processing power, the ability to fully understand things, is derived from the brain's ability to cross-examine memories and past experiences, using clues in your own learned history to determine what exactly is happening. For the extremely short version, this is what we'll call the mind for now. Of course, one could imagine this process would take a bit longer than it would take for the ball to hit your glove. But you also have to take into account that before any rock-solid conclusion can be made about what's happening, the mind would like a bit more confirmation. That would come in the form of signals coming from your hand's nervous system, more specifically its pain receptors, and traveling up to your brain, confirming that the ball has hit your hand and that what was happening was indeed a ball being thrown at you. Finally, your mind can then process that new information and come to its definite conclusion. At this, you have now come to understand within your own reality that a ball was thrown in your direction. Good job. While this process, ironically enough, involves so much quick thinking that we can't even think about it, it's undeniable that there is a significant delay in your perceived reality's time versus actual reality's time. Even if you've caught that same ball a million times already, there will still always be a delay. And since a memory is a record of something that once happened, you cannot be said to live within anything but a memory of the past, even if to you, you perceive it as happening in the moment. Which I suppose from your perspective that isn't really a memory, but that just further proves how warped your own reality is. So disconnected and delayed from what's actually happening in the real world. Furthermore, it may not technically be registered as a memory within your brain, as it's sort of happening in real time, but then the mind would almost serve as a memory storage database for the experiences your brain has, which then only get fully contextualized within the mind. But by that time, the brain's initial reactionary awareness has already kind of moved on. So I don't know if you can call what is left for the mind to process anything but a memory. Now, I'd have to think about this a lot more before I made a definite conclusion on this, but in some way you can kind of say that the process of analyzing these memories is what the mind is, but I'll give a more solidified answer to that in the future. Thus, that's where we ultimately reside, though. This isn't even to point out how a moment in time is the most incalculable thing in existence, and that it is almost impossible to determine what is a memory and what isn't. But I think we'll save that for a discussion on the second greatest anime ever made, Steins Gate. So, in conclusion, you are a ghost. Now you're probably asking yourself, what could this possibly have to do with Lilypads? And I want you to look at it this way. You playing catch with your friend is the Lilypad floating on the water's surface, not much to see there. You watching this video and thinking about the deeper mechanisms that involve that game of catch, well, now you're exploring the stem. With every one thing we know about our existence and reality, there are a dozen things that lurk beneath the surface, making us question the validity of that one initial thing in the first place. I imagine a single flower, clearly understood, but that once you rip it out of the ground, you see a horrific amount of roots, spanning miles, come out of it, covered in dirt, staring at you. When you begin to account for the innumerable amount of processes that go into even an action as seemingly simple as catching a ball, you begin to realize you hold no actual understanding of the world at all. You are caught in space, aimlessly floating around, screaming out into a void. Reality becomes a mere illusion. But that's just what lies right below the surface. No, my friend, the horrors become even more unknown once we dive deeper. I was able to explain to you the process of catching the baseball, even if I've never really studied the things that I'm talking about here. Rather, I'm able to use logical reasoning to come to these conclusions. And while I could be completely wrong here, I at the very least don't believe myself to be. I can feel the solid ground right beneath my feet, even if standing on that ground has horrifying implications about the validity of my own reality. But what about the stuff that lies even further below? The things that I, or any of us, could never possibly understand. As I described the Lilypad stems to you earlier, I likened it to an endless length, one that could go on forever. As I said, those things are way longer than they should be. Even if I can deduce that they don't actually go on forever, my abstract perception of them sees them as infinite. The rabbit hole has no end, and I could never come to understand it. Lovecraftian horror, or cosmic horror, almost entirely relies on our innate fear of the unknown. These aren't scary monsters hurting us, but rather the fear lies in that we can't be sure that there aren't scary monsters wanting to hurt us. When presented with something definite in front of you, like a baseball hurling at you, you know that there is theoretically something you can do to stop it. The danger is, well, dangerous, but at least it's present. You can see it with your own two eyes. You can understand it to some degree at least. Cosmic horror, however, offers no such understanding. Not only can you not see the danger right in front of you in most cases, but you're not entirely sure what the danger even is, or if it's there to begin with. Even if you could see it, you couldn't even begin to understand it, let alone do something about it. You'd probably just lose your mind. That latter concept is what makes Junji Ito's work so terrifying. And that is perhaps humanity's greatest fear, the unknown. Freud postured that this is why we created religion and the gods, for comfort. Sure, we couldn't understand their minds, but that was okay, because we could bear witness to their actions, craft stories around them to make them more human. They aren't exactly like us, but if they were, then they couldn't understand the world around us either. Nobody could. It's the perfect coagulation of human enough to relate to and make sense of, and godly enough to take comfort that at least something out there can make sense of our reality. Lovecraft, to counter this, created stories in which we could never relate to those godly beings, and we can never understand why they do what they do. And in coming to terms with the fact that we can never understand what they are thinking, those that control everything, we come to realize that it is fundamentally impossible to really understand the reality we live in. Scary. Of course, I talked much more extensively about this in my Doki Doki Literature Club video, which, oh, hey, just happens to be my best video and will just so happen to be in the end card of this video. Now you have something to do after watching the entirety of this video. Strange how life works like that. You're welcome. I can think of no better analogy for this phenomenon than the Lilypad, and I believe this is why I have always been scared of them once I realized they had stems. We think them to be one thing, a simple little plant floating on the surface, just as we like to imagine our reality being comprehensible. But once we see those stems, the unholy amount of them as we swim under the water, tangling us up with their existential implications, we cannot be anything but horrified. We can't even begin to imagine how far down they go. and what eldritch abominations may await us at the bottom. Whatever machinations are controlling our reality, whatever lies below the surface, we will always be unaware of. And because of this, our reality, the plane of which we live in, is fundamentally incomprehensible. Furthermore, we perceive most bodies of water to be seemingly endless, with the floor of that body being out of reach. We are naturally afraid of water like this because we cannot see, and thus cannot fully contextualize and understand, the bottom. And what makes the stems of lilypads so inherently disturbing is that they do, in fact, reach that bottom. They, a single plant, span the entire height of that body of water and do the things that we never could. They are, in that way, all-knowing. They and they alone reach that place that is so incomprehensible to us, and yet also present themselves right on the surface for all to see. Most will never even see their stems. That length, I think, is what disturbs me the most, and is why the lilypad is the perfect analogy for the vast expanse of unknown cosmic horrors we can only dream about. But just when you thought lilypads couldn't get worse, ho boy they can. Have you ever seen those gigantic lilypads that people can sit on? I have many times, as my friends used to bully me by showing me pictures of them. This is worse than Lovecraft's monstrosities. Because while they and the stems of lilypad at least have the common courtesy to rest in a place we can't easily see, these certain lilypads have the audacity to just sit there, out in the open, horrifying all who dare step near them. If you've never seen them, then your soul is still pure, rejoice, but if you have, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying here. And what makes this even worse than everything previously mentioned, at least to me, is that not only is it clearly visible, but it pops the bubble of believable reality that we can normally live in rather comfortably. Even myself, who clearly thinks too much about the cosmic implications of a literal plant, lives most of my time distracted by, well, life. But it's moments like seeing a giant lilypad that rip you out of that illusion, and make you further realize that reality is just really bizarre. It's the same fear that comes from seeing gigantic bugs. Something that is supposed to be a certain size, which is rather small, is suddenly blown up to epic proportions, making me question if we live in a real world or if someone is using cheat codes in The Sims 4. Our understanding of lilypads is that they are not nearly that size. So then when we see them be that size, we are left to question what else is off about them, or about our reality. This naturally leads us to the horrifying mysteries we've been discussing today. But it's not even just the size that bothers me. No, it's those walls. They haunt me in my nightmares. They violate my brain constantly. They're so straight, as if someone crafted them with a 3D printer. The lilypad itself is also so horrifyingly flat. So the geometry of the entire beast is just wrong. It looks like a render in a video game. It's too perfect. Which to a human eye is always going to be inherently interesting and, in most cases, very, very disturbing. To us, this is not what reality is supposed to look like. It makes us question, doubt. Do we really understand our reality at all? Or are the infinitely long stems from hell always sitting and hiding, waiting for a time when you'll fall into the pond, drowning you in their existential questions? This is what true cosmic horror looks like, and I just pray that it doesn't entangle you like it has to me. Hey everyone, wow, I haven't done an end video monologue in a while, huh? I actually wanted to do one for my Arcane video, but I wanted to leave the viewer with an emotional impression that would hopefully haunt them even after the video was over. Cutting that tension talking about the channel, well, I just don't think it would have the same effect. I was actually going to do a mid-roll like credit thing like the end of Ava does, but decided against it last minute. Anyways, I hope you like this new style of video. I want to do more like it, just taking a seemingly random topic and trying to find the hidden horrors behind it. I think it could be a fun exercise, so here's the deal. Leave a comment on whatever you would want to see me give the same exact treatment, and the comment with the most likes will be the winner, and I'll make the video. This topic could basically be whatever you want, and I promise I would do my absolute best to find at least one horrifying thing about it, even if it's more of a meta commentary. I'm asking for a challenge here. I won't be tackling topics that I would deem controversial or political. I'm not saying I'll never talk about those things. I mean, the Arcane video I would say is very politically charged already, but this little project is really more just for fun. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. In other news, uploads on the channel will be a bit slow for a while, but worry not, because this is for good reason. I'm working on a horror short film. You can expect a trailer to come out for that in the nearest future, as well as, most likely, a Kickstarter campaign to raise some money for the project. Your boy is broke, and legal fees are more expensive than I thought. So be on the lookout for that, and don't worry, it's not about Lilypads. I would also appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video, as since my upload frequency will be a bit lower than usual, my channel could definitely use the extra interaction. Oh, and one more thing, go subscribe to my second channel, link will be in the description. I plan on doing gaming videos over there, maybe streaming, we'll see. I want to talk about even more games on this channel, especially indie and horror ones, and a combination of them. And I think it'd be cool to share the experience of actually playing them with you all. Anyways, remember to stay away from Lilypads, condemn any Lilypad believers, and, as always, thank you for watching.